Hello, everybody. This is HR.3261. Recently, I've been asked what my thoughts are on the Stop Online Piracy Act, or otherwise known as SOPA, or even HR.3261 as it's officially designated. People have asked me what my thoughts are on it, partially because I had another video where I talked about a bill that is basically the predecessor of this bill. So I don't remember offhand what it is, but I'll link it in the comments or whatever. Anyway, before I get to my personal thoughts on it, I think it's probably best if I go over some of the fine points. Now, the government, one of the government agencies, is dedicated to summarizing bills. And they do a really good job, and they're well respected for being bipartisan, for being unbiased. And so I've done most of my summarization based on what they said about the bill. They only talk specifically about what the bill literally does. They don't really look at the consequences of a bill or what things might happen. And so I think that's fair for an unbiased source to do. But I'm not an unbiased source, so I'm going to talk about those things. Anyway, the first thing it does is it gives the Attorney General the ability to seek court orders to force website owners, hosts, or domain name registrars to pull down or block websites that are infringing of copyrights or are being used to facilitate infringing of copyrights. This part of the bill is to specifically target torrent websites, supposedly. Secondly, it creates a process to allow a copyright owner, such as like Viacom or the movie studios or the music or the other the music companies. It gives them a process very similar to how the DMCA works, to send a notification requiring something, requiring that something be taken down, and allows the person who has the content to file a counter notification to object to that. And that's very similar to how the DMCA works currently. It will require internet service providers, including search engines, payment networks, advertising networks, to comply with the court orders requested by the Attorney General to block particular websites. The reason that's in there is because it's otherwise hosting companies and stuff would have they might have a difficult time enforcing that previous provision. There are some consequences to that as well, but I'll get to that in a moment here. It does provide some kinds of immunity to service providers who comply with the requirements of the SOPA. So it does provide certain amount of safe harbor provisions like the DMCA did. Like I said, each of these things have consequences, which I have to stop myself from getting into. It gives the... let me see here. Oh, yeah, it also addresses counterfeit goods and counterfeit drugs and websites that are specifically trafficking in things that are considered to be harmful for the public good, which includes websites that sell prescription medication and do not require prescription. And so that part of the bill seems to be targeting like Canadian drug companies or Canadian pharmacies who will ship overseas. So yeah, it includes that in the bill. Oh yeah, it includes the full text of S-978, which was a bill to expand the definition of criminal copyright infringement to include public performances. I have a whole video on that. I talk a bit more about the bill and exactly what it does. That whole bill is included in this one. So if you don't like that one, then you're at least that part should carry over. It increases the penalties for revealing trade secrets with specific wording to include giving trade secrets to foreign governments or the agencies of foreign governments, etc. For instance, a lot of the industry in China is in fact ran by people who are controlled by the Chinese government. And so if you were to be giving trade secrets from one industry to a Chinese company, you're really just giving it to the government of China. And so it increases those kind of penalties. It directs the U.S. Sentencing Commission to review sentencing guidelines and to make changes that they deem necessary. Whatever. So who knows what that would mean. And it requires the appointment of an intellectual property attaché at least one embassy in each Department of State's regional bureau. I didn't really look up how many different bureaus there were. So that might mean a couple dozen, or it might mean 20 or 30. It might even mean just 5. I'm not really sure how big the bureaus are. But I'd kind of suspect that it would include an area like the Middle East would be our bureau, maybe a couple bureaus in Europe, whatever, something like that. That part seems to be like the least worrisome of the whole thing, so I'm not too worried about that. Anyway, so what are the consequences of the bill? Well, it gives the United States de facto ability to enforce our own laws in countries in which they don't necessarily enforce they don't have necessarily the same laws. So, for instance, if I were to if I had a website and I was in Norway, for instance, and my name was the Pirate Bay, the government can now order any business in the United States from doing any kind of business with that company. So it includes things like PayPal, it includes Google, it includes any kind of advertising network. And so we can effectively shut down that website entirely. Essentially by doing, it can, am I bumbling over my words again here? Oh yeah, and since the United States is essentially in control of all domain naming, they'll have the ability to essentially shut down domain names, which, although doesn't necessarily entirely take a website off the internet, it makes it so the average user will be completely unable to find it, especially if they're able to order Google not to index the site anymore either. So it doesn't necessarily completely erase the website from the internet, but it gets about as close as you can get without invading another country. Another consequence is that it really creates a situation where the individual is presumed guilty, and until they're able to prove their own innocence. So you suffer the consequence. So they're able to essentially shut down businesses in their entirety in the case of online businesses, or even just financially damaged businesses that are not just financially, who refuse to go along. So they're able to do this without a full court proceeding. They're able to just do this with a simple court order. Now that can be contested, but that is extremely expensive. It requires very expensive lawyers, and in a lot of cases of small websites, that's going to be completely out of the possibility. And so essentially, they'll just have to capitulate. It will shut down torrent sites to a degree. Any torrent site in the United States will be shut down pretty quickly because everything's in the United States. Any torrent site outside the United States will be blocked at both the level of the internet service provider, and it'll probably have their domain name removed, and it'll be blocked from access to any kind of advertising or payment processing network which does business in the United States. However, although that is the aim of the bill, and I don't necessarily have too much of a problem with it, although I am a hypocrite in that regard because I do use torrent sites, but shh, don't tell anybody. However, it won't be entirely effective. There are plans in the works to create what's called darknet. It will be an alternate internet, and likely things like torrent sites will pop up there. Also, you can use a proxy to get past any kind of blocking that even your ISP can do, because all traffic on a proxy is encrypted, and there's no way for the ISP to know what's going over the proxy. Alternatively, if they just go with DNS level blocking, you can, if you want, use a DNS that's not the one provided by your internet service provider. For instance, if you use Comcast, you're actually probably better off using called OpenTNS, you probably get a much better search results or a much better like website load times and whatnot. Oh yeah, another consequence is that Google and Bing and other search engines, the government will be able to order them via court order to remove listings of any website they host. I think I already probably even mentioned that already. It is possible that ISPs will be required to do what's called deep packet inspection to ensure that users are not accessing blocked websites. So the only way to make sure a user is not is not accessing a website if they've bypassed your DNS is to look at the addressing on the individual packets and block them at that level. In the past, there has been a huge amount of controversy over what's called deep packet inspection because they're literally looking at the information that you're sending out to the web. And so they will be able to, if you trust your ISP, it's not a huge deal, but I don't know anybody out there who completely trusts their ISP with every little piece of information. Well, I guess you do by default, but this essentially will require the ISPs to do so. So the ISPs who want to do well will be forced to violate their users' privacy. Also, another thing, if you are familiar with the Arab Spring events from earlier this year, where the government, where people were rebelling against, essentially tyrannical governments, part of that organization was their ability to use what's called proxies to bypass the filters in place for the governments. A lot of those proxies are based in the United States, and they will be blocked and shut down. And that will be a big problem. Also, that'll be a fairly large problem for essentially the free expression of ideas past government borders. So when a government when a government is not of the people anymore, there needs to be an outlet, a way for the users to communicate that. And the reason why those proxy services would probably be shut down is that they're frequently used for copyright infringement, and so it would be a way to connect into it'd be a way to bypass the U.S. level blocks would use a proxy, and so the government will naturally start blocking the proxies. So we'll see. So that'll certainly happen. It increases the risk for whistleblowers. And this is important because whistleblowers are highly important for when businesses get out of control. And for instance, if a business is dumping material somewhere and they want to keep it secret, oftentimes they can, because the industry oversight is not, it's not 100%. There's often always a lot of ways to hide things. And so whistleblowers are important to stop that kind of abuse. The increases in the changes to trade secret related offenses will make whistleblowing that much more risky. It's already the case that whistleblowers are often sued by the companies that they're whistleblowing on for revealing trade secrets. And there's been a number of very famous cases, even in the last couple of years, where that's happened. And so that's a really unfortunate consequence of this bill. Oh yes, parts of the bill can be read in a way that would make it sound like service providing websites will need to start filtering. They're doing proactive screening, and so the way it works now is a passive system on the most part. So if you were to upload one of my photos to a website without my permission, I would have to approach the website, make them aware of it, and they'd take it down. The way it is now is that companies can be held accountable for not actively screening content. And that's a big problem because websites like Flickr, Vimeo, not YouTube, but I'll get to that in a second. But a lot of websites, like even what am I thinking here? Wikipedia. A lot of these websites could not exist if they were required to pre-screen every user submission. There's simply no way for that to happen. They couldn't exist the way they are. YouTube has a pretty good system called the content ID matching. The problem with that is that it's both really expensive to implement for the copyright, for the website. YouTube can do it because they have Google backing them, so that's how YouTube can do it. But for much smaller companies, it's extremely difficult. The technology that goes into content ID matching is very expensive and time consuming, and it's not perfect either. There are a ton of false positives, and a part of this bill is that Google, not wanting to get their ass handed to them in court, is going to turn up the sensitivity on content ID matching, and that will result in a lot more false positives popping up. So if you ever upload a gaming video and it pops up with a content ID match of some random channel, that's going to go up a lot. That's going to happen a lot more. I've had a total of 6 videos that's happened to. I've successfully filed counter notices on every single one of them, but if Google's default action is, instead of just putting a note on it, if their default action is to take it down, then what will I do? What could I do to on a false positive? There's hard, YouTube is already notoriously bad at responding to complaints from users. I mean, I love YouTube, but they're just not good at customer service when it comes to certain kinds of things. Like if they for instance, on my partner applications, they rejected me with the most generic message. And they do that for everything. They just have generic form messages. You never get any kind of details out of them. If you send them emails, they never respond. They're just really bad about that. And I have no reason to think that it would be any different in a really aggressive, proactive content ID matching system. And kind of the last major effect that I wanted to mention is called the chilling effect. In legal parlance, chilling effect is a term used to describe inhibition or discouragement of the legitimate exercise of a constitutional right by the threat of legal sanction. That's from Wikipedia. Thank you. This will also, so other than just making people afraid to for instance, make people make videos on YouTube, it also have the effect of making venture capitalists a bit more afraid about any kind of online venture. So we'll end up seeing a lot less of like interesting ideas where user content features prominently, like Facebook. If this law passes and a company were to propose a Facebook-like site as the big new thing, you wouldn't be able to find a venture capitalist to back it, because they would be too afraid that they wouldn't have enough control over the users to keep from losing their safe harbor provisions. In any event, I have some interesting quotes here. This is from Grant Gross from the IDG News Service here. Further, the definition of dedicated to theft of U.S. property is so broad it would unduly ensnare legitimate companies' websites, products, and services. I think that's a fair characterization of the potential risks we face here with this law. Law professor Derek Bulmer says the default matters here a lot. The defaults matter here a lot. Payment providers and advertisers must cease doing businesses with such sites unless the site owner counter notices, and even then, the IP owner can obtain an injunction to the same effect. Moreover, to counter notify, a site owner must concede jurisdiction, which foreign sites will undoubtedly be reluctant to do. That's important because this bill changes what the default action is. Currently, the default action is inaction. This will make it so the default action is to remove the site from the internet rather than, wait until a lawsuit is successful. It waits until the lawsuit is unsuccessful to put the site back on. That's paraphrasing and simplifying to a degree, but yeah. The private action section of the bill is extremely problematic. Under its provisions, YouTube is clearly unlawful, and neither advertising or payment providers would be able to transact business with it. Well, Google does their own advertising and payment providing, so I'm not sure that would be a big deal for them. I'm not sure I agree necessarily with this analysis. Google does a lot of active transactions, but the thing is, Google will have to actually change the way they do business quite a bit. Google and YouTube. I think it's probably a good idea to look at who supports SOPA and who opposes SOPA. Currently, there are 27 U.S. representatives, and I don't know exactly how many senators, but quite a few as well. A lot of the supporters are companies who intellectual property is very important to them, who would only benefit from the increase in intellectual property. So companies like the Motion Picture Association of America, the Recording Industry Association of America, Macmillan Publishers, which is a really big publisher of Nature magazine. Oops, I just broke that, didn't I? Viacom. Interestingly, the AFL-CIO, but they are a labor union, so it's not. Well, I'm not sure why they spoke up about it. Anyway, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is another interesting one. NBC Universal, obviously. Price Fitzer. They're a less obvious one, but they are. It's very important for them to get the counterfeit drug issues. Those parts of the bill are actually quite important for them because they are losing quite a bit of business to overseas, drug companies like Canadian pharmacies and whatnot. There are some valid points about the drug issue. It is a situation where there are a lot of people getting hurt, or a lot of people getting scammed with fake drugs. So there are some issues there that make sense. Ford Motor Company, I'm not really sure why they took their stand on it, but there you go. There's Revlon, the NBA. NBA is probably an obvious one. They do a lot. Their entire business is the selling of intellectual property, and that's 80% of their business. The Business Software Alliance is an interesting one. They supported it, but not entirely. They've expressed concerns. Interestingly enough, Kaspersky, the virus scanner company, has actually given the BSA a ultimatum saying that unless they change their position on it by July 1st, they will be withdrawing from that organization. So that's an interesting little bit of drama there. Who opposes SOPA? Well, essentially the companies who would be hurt by it most oppose it. Google, which owns YouTube. Yahoo, which owns a lot of stuff that's related to content, or related to user created content, including like, what is that? Yahoo Answers and whatnot. Facebook, the big one. Twitter could be ordered to not allow people to link to certain sites. AOL, they're a bigger company than people realize. They own a lot of stuff silently that you don't notice. LinkedIn, like Facebook for business. eBay, it would certainly change the way eBay had to do business, that's for certain. Mozilla Corporation, they're the people who make Firefox. The Brookings Institute is one of the oldest think tanks in Washington. It was founded in the 1918. It's hugely important. Reporters Without Borders, Electronic Frontier Foundation, ACLU, Human Rights Watch, and the Liberty Copyright Alliance. They don't oppose the entire bill, but they do oppose parts of the bill. Specifically, I believe the parts that increase the penalties for certain parts of for online streaming. So sorry, that's the Library Copyright Alliance. So yeah, they specifically oppose the parts that increase the penalties for streaming audio, media, and stuff like that. I did not see what they said about the rest of the bill, so I can't say that they just oppose all of it though. my final thoughts. The right to own property is paramount in this country. It allows us to, allows innovation. It's extremely important. But also the right to free speech. Free speech? Bad speech. Sorry, the right to free speech is also extremely important. But unfortunately, these two rights conflict. The right to free speech and the right to own property, you can't have both of them be unlimited rights. There has to be a point in which we decide where we're going to give up a little bit of one and give up a little bit of the other. For instance, for the right to free speech, if I had unlimited free speech rights, that means you would have, companies would have no way to make money on movies. They'd have no way to make money on music. They would be, essentially, you would see the entire industries disappear. But however, if the right to property was unlimited, you would never, for instance, patents would never expire. So you'd never have great ideas, including really important drugs, go into the free market. They would always be owned by a single company, and there'd be nothing you could do about it. You would never see copyrights expire. We're kind of there now because it takes so long, but that's another issue. So unlimited property rights would stifle innovation and would stifle free speech. But also unlimited free speech would remove a lot of the incentives to innovate. So we need to find a common ground. We need to find a good balance. And that's what the DMCA was trying to do, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. A lot of people didn't like it, but it was a lot of people on both sides of the issue didn't like it. And that, to me, is a good indicator that we found a good compromise. Where both sides are equally unhappy, sometimes that's the best you can hope for. And the DMCA provided excellent benefits to service providers. It allowed websites like Wikipedia, YouTube, Facebook. These websites wouldn't exist today without the DMCA or something like it. That's the simple fact. They could not exist without that. A lot of people hate it, but it's extremely important to the website we know and love today. SOPA is an attempt to readdress that balance. It's an attempt to shift that power meters and yards, or meters and miles, I don't know, to shift that power all the way over to the other side. It gives the copyright holders the first power. It gives it way too much power, and it really upsets a delicate balance. Yes, copyright infringement is a problem. It does hurt the industries that happens to, but I don't think it really hurts them as much as they like to think it does. But on the flip side, the rights we have now, as far as the DMCA goes, there have been a lot of abuses with the DMCA. The Motion Picture Association of America has been known to file way overblown DMCA notices. There have been a lot of people who have abused them on YouTube specifically to get things they disagree with taken down. And so even the DMCA has its issues. So I'm not gonna be a total defender of the DMCA. It is important, but I think it can be addressed better than it does. Well, my final thought. I think I already covered my final thought and I kept rambling. But in any event, my point is the SOPA goes too far. It creates an internet where only the most copyright paranoid websites will survive. The internet will no longer be the free internet it is today if SOPA is passed. And I don't think I'm understating the case at all here. So, in conclusion, I'll be putting some links in the description bar if you guys wanted to fill out some petitions and to contact your congressmen. And I have a whole list of websites that if you wanted to read more, some of them are articles that I found interesting in writing my little dissertation here. Some of them are also like direct sources, I have it here. Like Open Congress is an excellent website where they just go right into like the specifics of the bill. It's a really good site. That's it. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know. I'll try to respond to everybody like I usually do. I don't ask this a lot, but if you enjoyed the video and if you wanted to help spread this around, please share this to your friends, to your family. Please upvote it and favorite it. That'll help spread the word. Thanks. Goodbye.